Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Sultans and Sneakers. I'm your host, Mahin the podcaster, and on today's episode, I've got Mawlana Kamil Uddin from Darul Qasim. Mawlana Kamil, assalamu alaikum, welcome to the show.
Alaikum salam. Happy to be here.
I hear you don't come this south in the Chicagoland area too often.
No, not often, but alhamdulillah, it's good to be here.
What is it about Chicago guys? You know, I'm not from here that, they don't like traveling outside like their little like comfort zone. I know that's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, in my area, there's just everything is so close by.
Everything you need is there.
Yeah, you need is there.
Right.
So, alhamdulillah.
Okay, so you're obviously here today just to give everybody a heads up. We're going to talk about the Darul Qasim March program, which we'll get into. But a little bit about yourself. What pushed you to get interested in like pursuing the study of Islam, maybe as a kid, or whenever you did start?
Alhamdulillah, I started when actually my father, alhamdulillah, was a big influence in coming here and setting us up with knowledge avenues, whether it would have been through the masjid, through local scholars. Even when we'd go back home, he'd take us to visit different ulama. Even when we went for Hajj, he made it a point to seek out certain ulama and for us me and my brothers, to meet with them and interact with them. And so those seeds were kind of planted early on. And then I guess the spark was after I had completed Hifz along with one of my brothers. We went for Hajj, and at Hajj there was this overwhelming burden of not knowing, not knowing who Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is, not knowing, being so dependent on ibadat, on what you need in order for your ibadat to count. And so that really struck a chord with me in terms of, I memorized the Qu'ran, I want to now learn Arabic, I want to pursue it further, I want to have a structured learning process. And so I would say the seeds that my father and mother planted early on and the spark of ibadah and Hajj specifically is what drove me to learn.
Roughly how old were you when you were on this Hajj trip?
It was right after high school.
Okay. Yeah. So did you do full-time Hifz, or did you like do it concurrently with like your studies?
I did part of it concurrently with high school, and then I finished it in high school.
I see. And then when you were motivated, did you study your formal Islamic studies overseas or here in Chicagoland area?
No, formally I started here.
Okay.
And I completed here as well.
Okay.
And then after I graduated, I sought out certain scholars, whether it been here or abroad, and studied with them privately.
Okay.
But my formal studies, both in Hifz and Alimiyyah, are done locally.
Okay, mashallah. So talk to me about your relationship with Sheikh Amin. Like, when did you first come across Sheikh Amin?
Sheikh Amin, mashallah, is an amazing individual. And
maybe for those of us a lot of people aren't aware of who he is, right? So why don't you like tell the listeners or the viewers like a little bit about him from your point of view?
Sheikh Amin has, those of us that grew up here in the Chicagoland area had an acquaintance with Sheikh Amin, even if we didn't study directly underneath him. And he comes from the Deobandi tradition, and the institution that he established is Darul Qasim, which is named after the institution, a founder of the institution from which he graduated from, Mawlana Qasim rahimahullah, as well as Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam stating that he is Qasim. Allah is the one who gives, but Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the Qasim. He is the distributor of that knowledge that was given. And so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's name was Qasim, and thus the name of Darul Qasim, the house of Qasim, is established. But Sheikh Amin, what he did was he gathered a group of individuals who are qualified to have studied Islam formally, and he brought them under one roof at Darul Qasim, and he has this uncanny ability to merge content with context. And and he caught my eye young. I remember listening to a Jummah khutbah of his when I was in high school, and he was talking about one of the names of Allah Ta'ala, and it just struck a chord with me. And ever since then, I knew of Sheikh Amin because of his influence in the area. And then after graduating is when we were, myself, some of my colleagues and classmates were exposed to him after graduating Alimiyyah, studying with him privately, studying with him formally. And mashallah, he is a leader of many scholars. And so we're lucky and fortunate to have him above us.
You know, I've met a lot of folks in Chicagoland. I mentioned I'm not a native, listeners, I'm not a Chicago native, but when I first came here, I would hear about him like referred to as, even today, like people who, I have friends who are like, oh, Hafiz Amin used to teach us in the basement of my dad used to invite us over for our like basement halaqah back in like the 80s and the 90s, right? Which, you know, I think he has that kind of like that, but I think a lot of folks are missing this point. They think that like I feel like a lot of people around here still feel like, oh, he's just the uncle who like knows something. and I in my perspective is that Sheikh Amin doesn't really, he's fine with that essentially, but like once you start getting in, once you're around him more, you're around the institute a little bit more, you talk to other people who have knowledge, then you're like, this guy's like a giant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but like, I almost feel like there's more ghira for like, for that status of his, that where it's almost like I talk to other Darul Qasim students, and when they just hear people say, "Oh, Hafiz Amin," yeah, you know, they get really like offended by it. What's your take on that whole? It seems like he is kind of like he knows it is what it is, but like, what's your take on that perception in the Chicagoland area amongst like laity? You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah. It happens. Names tend to stick.
Yeah,
and since when Sheikh Amin came to Chicagoland area, people didn't know much besides Hifz.
Right.
And so when he taught Hifz, he was known as Hafiz Amin. But many decades ago, he graduated from Hafiz to something beyond that.
Right.
So, alhamdulillah, it is probably from his tawadu that he doesn't correct people in that regards, and just goes with the flow.
Sure.
But yeah, it is a misconception that people have in regards to Sheikh Amin, they're not exposed to his level of knowledge, or they haven't sat with any of his durus, any of his tafsir sessions. But when they do, the lights turn on. Right.
I was in a dars earlier this week, actually, where the teacher, who I think used to teach at Darul Qasim, had mentioned, somehow we were talking about like some metaphysical stuff, and he mentioned Sheikh Akbar Ibn Arabi. And he basically said, like, listen, if you're going to read Ibn Arabi, the only person I can really think that you should read it from is Sheikh Amin. Because everyone else misses the point. He's a very misunderstood individual. And so there's one layer, because like Ibn Arabi, you know, you look, there's an Ibn Arabi podcast. I don't know if you knew this or not. Ibn Arabi Society, you know, so you've all these like academics and like Western traditions talking about Ibn Arabi, and there's all over the place, right? And now Ibn Arabi got famous for this because of Ertugrul, right? But apparently, but he's so deep, and then you realize that this is the only, it's like one of the few individuals, probably in the English speaking world, that can really speak on Ibn Arabi with some level of authority, right? And just something, but it's something, again, he's not. I don't know that it's being advertised to the masses, because I've never got this vibe that Darul Qasim is about like this kind of like clickbaity, attract everybody to learn, right? My perception has always been that Darul Qasim is for serious students, but at the same time encouraging like himma or ambition for people to take their studies seriously.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Darul Qasim in its curriculums, it merges many different curriculums, and that's why you see like a true representation of Shawariullah, of Ibn Arabi, and these great thinkers of the past. And so, because of that, the structured method of learning is what really attracts people. And if they're more into this halaqa-based knowledge, then that clickbaity type of knowledge that you were referring to, then it doesn't really attract them. But for the serious students and the people who are geared towards that content, Darul Qasim is the place to go.
Your own studies, did you come up through like a Darul Uloom, like Dars Nizami curriculum?
Yes.
So one of the things I was going to ask about Darul Qasim is that one of the examples when people come to Chicago and they ask me, okay, what's the difference between Darul Qasim and like Darul Uloom and like Buffalo or like Dar es Salaam or like IIE? I'm like, well, the best, and my analogy has always been, I don't know if this is right, so correct me, feel free to correct me. I've always thought of Darul Qasim as more like Nadratul Ulama, and like the other like Darul Ulooms is like Deoband. Because of the kind of, what I know about, like, you know, if you don't know who knows my book, what is a madrasa? Dr. Ibrahim Musa talks about this because he studied at both institutions. And I've always felt like at a Darul Uloom, you're going to get like the rigor, like the fundamentals down, right? The basics, all the ulum, of the sciences. But Darul Qasim has this extra layer of, like, I think you mentioned it, the context and like how to interact with the greater civilization, right? Could you comment on that? Is that analogy? Because when someone is looking to like pursue studies, so I mean, I've had people come through Chicago. We know that Darul Qasim has people who will travel, who will move here from other cities to study, right? What is the, like, when they're evaluating institutions, what is it about Darul Qasim that you think attracts those students versus maybe for another institute?
Yeah, I'll go to the first question first, then I'll get to that last one.
Yeah.
But in terms of the comparison between Darul Uloom Deoband and Nadwatul Ulama, I think there's a misplacement of trying to compare what's on the opposite side of the globe with what's here.
Okay.
Darul Qasim is not trying to be Deoband or Nadwatul Ulama. It's trying to be Darul Qasim here in Chicago. We're not trying to supplant Deoband or Nadwatul Ulama or Sahanpur or any other institution from the subcontinent or other areas of the world as well. And place them here. Darul Qasim is going to be Darul Qasim, and it's going to grow organically and the content is important because the content doesn't change. Like, you'll have staples in the curriculum that you have here that I can go to any place. For example, I've studied Hanafi fiqh. If I go to any place that teaches Hanafi fiqh, whether it be in Egypt, in Syria, in the subcontinent, in Turkey, the staples of the curriculum are the same.
Okay.
Like Quduri, Hidayah, they're not going to change. But the context will, the language will, the culture will. And so Darul Qasim is going to be Darul Qasim here in Chicago, based in Chicago, and is expanding throughout America. And then in regards to the second question, what distinguishes Darul Qasim, I think, is we've taken the intellectual strands of our turas, of our legacy, Islamic heritage, and we've merged them here at Darul Qasim. So we have experts of the Mughal era, of the Uthmani era, and of different traditions and different strands of the intellectual heritage coming together at Darul Qasim. And that's what provides the students this upper echelon of academic knowledge. Okay.
Now, Darul Qasim has, like, for starters, like the famous program is like Sheikh al-Hind, right? That's the 2-year program that a lot of folks will do, like, part-time. They're working or they're going to college, right? And then after Sheikh al-Hind is what's called intermediate, and then the bachelor's.
So the intermediate is the equivalent to the bachelor's.
Okay.
And it ends with the classical study of Hidayah, Jalalain, Mishkat, Sharh al-Aqaid.
Okay.
In the 4 main ulum of fiqh, aqidah, tafsir, and hadith.
Okay.
And then after that is what the advanced program is the Dawrah, Dawratul Hadith, an intense study of the classical canonical books of hadith, along with the Muwatta and other books. And then there's postgraduate programs as well, whether it be the Ifta, the Takhassus fi Tafsir, etc.
Right. Now, is there any, like, program that you specifically focus on teaching?
Yeah, I'm primarily in the Department of Tafsir.
Okay.
So I teach primarily books on Usul al-Tafsir, Ulum al-Quran, and Tafsir.
And do you teach in the Sheikh al-Hind and the intermediate?
I may teach in the part-time Shaykhul Hind,
Okay.
not in the full-time Shaykhul Hind classes, but in the part-time Shaykhul Hind, I may have classes. It depends on the scheduling.
Yeah.
And then into intermediate, advanced onwards, yes.
When a good friend of mine moved here from, like, again, out of state to, like, study the Shaykhul Hind full time, and he's got him stressed, man. He did a year. He's like, bro, like, and the thing is, every student who's like actually in a program. I have another good friend of mine. He's like a programmer. He's in like the intermediate program, and he's like, man, I failed this class. And this guy is like talking about, a legit programmer, 15, like he's a professional. He's like mid-30s, family guy and everything, and he's like stressed out because he failed this exam again. So what is it with the do you think like where's another in Al Institute, but at the same time, there's a graduate from another institute that came that I remember. I heard he like tried to place into one of the programs at Darul Qasim, and he like just flunked the placement exam. Mm-hmm. So, is there? Are you guys happy with like still the rigor? Like you guys know it's hard, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's acceptable. That's fine. I guess the question is, are you all satisfied with that rigor? Like knowing that like it is putting people through the grinder a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hold the standard, there has to be rigor,
right?
And so, we address. We're not going to completely just fail students for the sake of failing students,
right?
But it's to keep a standard,
right?
And actually, we want students to flourish and succeed,
sure.
And we kind of place them in classes so that they are on a path to success, academic success, intellectual rigor. And so, if they don't do well in a placement test or they don't do well in a class, it's for their own benefit to take part of that class again or take some of the modules that will help them succeed in that class, because the reason why there's a pedagogy.
Sure.
And it's gonna get worse if they just are let through the mill.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that way, because I was like, a lot of places I think they just like they're like, yeah, you're done your time, you can just pass you on, right? Get out of my hair. But with that being said, I think that like do you feel it's a lack of that we just don't have good study habits, as we're like raised with poor study habits, and therefore when you enter a curriculum that's tough, or maybe because obviously someone who is a programmer, maybe had done a degree in computer science, which is a hard degree. You're not going to graduate with that, just like getting by, right? With like bad study habits. Are there unique study habits that are necessary to study Islam? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question. Because I think they're coming into Darul Qasim or other madaris. There is a focus on the reading modality. So there are different modalities through which people learn. They may learn through kinesthetic learning or oral learning or visual learning. And so what really helps a student be successful is the reading modality, and so that they are it's not just the written tradition, but it's combined with the oral tradition. So them coming from a different field and then learning another language and then having to interpret text through that other language,
right?
It's a bridge, and we'll help them cross it though.
Okay. Is that something you also struggle with in your studies?
I would say that there's going to be a struggle for every student learning the language. But if there are certain things that can help with that. So if you have prior exposure to Arabic, you've memorized the Qu'ran, you already have some of that ujma, that foreignness removed from your tongue. It helps with the crossover.
Sure.
But everyone has struggles. In particular ulum, they may have struggles in the antecedent ulum to them. They may have certain grinds that they have to go through. But overall, if you have a regimen and you have a study habit and you stick to that, inshallah, you'll be successful.
Would you say that there's also challenges that students have, which is basic time management?
Yeah, I mean,
And distractions, like other distractions,
I used to talk to people who studied abroad as opposed to studying here.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things they would tell me. They're like, man, it's much more difficult to study here because of the available distractions.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're abroad, those distractions are kind of cut off if you're living on campus, in the school, in the environment. So it can be easier to time manage. But that's part of the culture here in America, you know, of this cosmopolitan structure that we have, that people are going to be involved in other things. So, yeah, Darul Qasim is not going to be a place where we're going to be on you 24/7. You're going to have to show dedication outside of the classroom to be successful in the classroom.
What about the distraction as far as like, I remember hearing Sheikh Hussein Abdul Sattar talk about this a long time ago, about like how people dabble in like with different mashayikh, right? Like now I imagine if you're in a program, but again, people aren't babysitting students 24/7. So let's say you're in the Sheikh Al-Hayn or intermediate program, but then you're like, oh, there's this sheikh coming from overseas and I want to go to his dars too. And you just keep doing that. And then do you see a challenge there where it's like, okay, the intent is to benefit from like, and the thing is when the scholar comes like, oh, I would crawl to the sheikh if he came, right? But do you think there's a challenge there too where people are just spreading themselves too thin because in Chicago, there's so many opportunities to learn?
Yeah, that is a problem. That because of that's some of the devilish whisperings that a student has to go through, because a student has their own, the shaitan tries to manipulate the talib al-ilm different than he does the general layman.
Right.
And so this does become a false form of seeking ilm, that is just you're not really a student, you're more of a fan of this individual.
Yeah.
And so it does take away from the structured learning that a person wants to have. I remember dealing with a potential applicant once, and I was looking at his transcript, and there was he studied almost the same 1 year intensive, but at like 3 different institutions. And essentially he could have just stayed at one of those institutions and gotten to an intermediate level of study, close to an advanced level of study. But because he was hopping, the grass always seemed greener on the other side.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to study at this institution, and then that, and then that, and then it's going to look good on my resume. But it doesn't really. He's learning the same content.
Yeah.
And he's not progressing. And so pedagogy is so important that you have a gradual progression towards ihsan and kamal.
Right. Yeah. So right now, I'll tell you, before we segue into the March program, so I've been studying, I think the thing I've been trying to be most consistent with is Arabic, right? Now, I did the whole game, I think I first dabbled in Arabic in 2007. You remember the old Bayna? There's a Bayna 10-day traveling course that Mawlana Kamil Uddin used to do, right? Back in the day. When nobody knew who he was, he used to come city to city. He was still living in New York. The institute wasn't even established yet. And so I remember it was 2007, he came to Ohio, that's where I'm from. So I did that. And I was like, okay, and then his style of teaching is okay, he's a good teacher. You're able to pick up, but it's a little unorthodox, right? But then you only get 10 days. And, and then you have then I took a class through Sunni Path in 2010. And that was more, I would say, dry, so you speak. And I've tried then I did Fawaki for a few years. And so I was throwing mud on the wall. You know what I mean? Cause it would happen, I would, for me, it was, I would study it and I was it's really dry. Or you have motivation in the beginning and then you fall behind and then you're it's dry and then you're something happens and you just kind of phase out, right? And now sort of last couple of years or 3 years actually, I've been doing Studio Arabiya, the Arabiya Baina Yadayk program, and it's going, I would say, but I think what's unique about this one is that I'm doing one-on-one instruction. It's just, and I'm only doing an hour a week. I'm not doing anything crazy. I was doing 2 hours a week. Now I'm just doing an hour a week, 1 class a week. And I'm still I think the progress is there. It's slow, but I feel like I haven't been as effective as I could be. And I'm still like, and I feel like I'm still, the thought does enter my mind of like, oh, maybe I should like try another institute, but this time I'm like, no. Right? Because I know there's anything called Andalus Institute. They have like, they use the same like kind of style of the conversational based, which I actually like that style. Because I think you can kind of like practice it in real life, especially living in where I live. You know what I mean? Even though folks hear it, sometimes they're like, man, nobody speaks Fusha.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, what advice do you have for Arabic, like learning in specifically? Because I've heard Arabic at DQ though, is that Darul Qasim is like the weed out class. Is that true? It's like organic chemistry for like pre-med students, you know?
I mean, the thing is, it's not meant to be a weed out class intentionally. It just becomes because you can't go anywhere without it.
Okay.
Right? So you can't access the ulum without Arabic, and so in that sense it becomes a weed out class.
Okay.
But I mean, the Arabic curriculum that we have at Darul Qasim is one that is geared towards the building certain skills for the student to be successful in later years. So whether it be starting off with the basics of grammar and morphology, and then studying that through modern literature, and then coupling that with classical literature.
Okay.
And then studying it with proofs, with dalail, a combination of rational and textual proofs, aqli, naqli, and combination of both. And then coupling that with balagha, rhetoric, Arabic literature.
Yeah.
And so it is a full-on curriculum in the first few years. And the ones that are most successful are the ones that do it full time.
Yeah.
Because language it requires an ambiance. It requires a realm to kind of put yourself into and then proceed. The challenge for part-time students is to get in and out of that.
Yeah.
It can be difficult. And because of that, it seems like they're not making any progress, though they've been studying, within a curriculum for a number of years.
Right.
And so it's really important at that time, if they're not consistent, then every 2 steps they take forward, they take a few steps back.
Yeah.
When they take a break, when they go on vacation, when summer hits, and so their part-time study for language in and of itself is difficult.
Right.
So it has its own challenges. So unless you're doing it consistently, it is going to seem like
it's just really slow. It's a snail's pace.
Very slow pace.
Yeah.
But the way to, because the point of it's an ala, it's a medium, it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's not the end. Arabic, you're not studying Arabic just to converse with your neighbor, right? You're studying Arabic for grander means.
Sure.
And so if a student is studying Arabic, but along the same path, he's studying a little bit of fiqh, aqidah, hadith, tafsir, these ulum that are actually going to develop his mafhum Islami, his intellectual thought, his Islamic understanding. Right. Then they'll be able to progress, and because they see it coming to fruition in these ulum. But if they just keep it at a conversational level, like how do I converse when I get to the airport or when I get to the train station? It's gonna be like they say motivation is like milk; it'll go bad in a few weeks. So
I never heard that comment actually. Motivation is like milk. Interesting.
So that's what happens. The drive to learn Arabic will stay there for a few weeks, a few months maybe. Right. But then there's a bad taste, and that's where I don't really like students studying part-time Arabic for this long. Okay. Because of this reason, that it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. It's almost like, I know this is going to be crippling for me. And it's not. It's just because the way that you were studying it is meant, it's geared for this type of growth. It's not meant to be crippling though. Yeah,
so when you're doing like, I talked to another sheikh about this, like about a South African scholar about this like a year ago. And I think he basically was like, he actually was like, would you consider quitting? And I'm like, no, I don't want to quit now. Because it's like, what's it called? sunken costs. Because every time you quit, you forget, right? Because when am I gonna find time to go full time?
Yeah.
I don't have that lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for people who have that, so are you then pushing people to say, and they're like, well, what's the real reason?
Yeah.
I mean, I just I think for me personally, I've always had this maybe it's a pipe dream, but I was like, maybe at some point when I'm 55, I'll be done with Arabic, and then I can place in the intermediate program or something.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. It's definitely a possibility if a person does consistent Arabic work for a number of years or time, they can grow to great lengths.
Right.
But I'm saying though the reason to stay consistent gets lost when a person only focuses on the tool, and they don't use the tool.
Yeah.
They call it in our lingo, they call it the alat and the aliyat.
Okay.
The alat is the instrumental tools. So these sciences of Arabic, logic, etc. These are alat. But the aliyat are the upper echelon of sciences. That's where you're going to use those tools, those skills. And so if you're not using them along the way, the tool becomes dull.
Right. Yeah. So right now I'm actually reading Ibn Ashur with Sheikh Hamza Maqbool.
That's great.
So that's the problem. Okay. That's so, and he has us read the actual Arabic text in that the way the Moroccans read it, the Maghribi style. So. Or I don't think that's I don't think they have a monopoly on it. That's just the way you get on YouTube. You just copy it, right? Yeah. Okay, that's fair. That's a good thing. So let's talk about MARS. First of all, what does MARS stand for?
So MARS stands for Muslim Academic Revival Series.
Okay.
In Arabic, it's Silsilatu Ihya'i Ulum al-Muslimin.
Okay.
And it is Darul Qasim's initiative, as Sheikh Amin has visioned it, to go global.
Okay.
And to have what is essentially unity at the level of ta'lim, wahdat ta'lim, unity at the level of learning. And it has, it's an effort to remove any barriers from learning. So we're teaching the ulum, the main sciences that a Muslim needs to know, without Arabic as a barrier.
Okay.
Without necessarily the grind of mutala, takrar, as they say, revision and pre-reading and all these other things that you have to do in order to be successful in a normal class. Removing all of that and just can you take in the content?
Okay.
And so it's the Darul Qasim's initiative to kind of bring Muslims to a higher standard of Islamic education without the barriers that would limit them otherwise.
So you're not going to get like a bunch of homework or that kind of stuff, right?
Yes, yeah. You're not going to get a lot of homework. It's meant to be a class in which you are a sponge, in which you can also ask questions.
Okay. Would you equate it for the Darul Qasim? Sheikh Amin has the Tafsir program, which is how long that's been running for? Like decades?
Many years.
Yeah. Right. Because you show up. Yeah. I mean, he's doing a couple of ayat at a week, and there's no homework. You just come. Is it that kind of style at least, where you're there to absorb, and then you go home, and then you come back the next week?
It is. However, I would say it's because it's in a classroom environment, there is a structure to it.
Okay.
And so the way that we are teaching a particular class is for this gradual growth. And whereas the tafsir, it is more of a public lecture, and obviously a person can take what they can benefit from, and they can use it in the way that you are referencing. But to actually register for a class, to be able to ask questions, though homework is not assigned, you could do a lot of reading if you want to. Right. If something sparks your interest, something really is a passion of yours in a particular module of the class, in a particular lecture, you can take that forward. So it's to provide this structured learning in the sciences, mainly So we have 4 different classes that we're launching with, 2 coming in the fall and 2 in the spring.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are the classes in the fall?
The classes in the fall are Intro to Quranic Themes,
okay,
and Intro to Islamic Theology.
Okay.
So the Quran is a book that many Muslims read, but the way that it is presented can be difficult to grasp what Allah's murad, what Allah's intent is.
Right.
And so to filter that into themes of the Quran allows a person to not just receive the universal message of the Quran,
Sure.
but through these themes, and it makes the Quran very cogent, very consistent in their mind. And then Islamic theology is also a great game changer for Muslims when they know what their aqaid are, when they know what to believe, how to believe in it, and how to represent that.
Sure. Are you teaching the Quran?
I'm teaching the Quranic themes class.
And then Dr. Volkan is teaching the theology one?
Yeah, along with other teachers. So the classes are offered in 3 different time zones.
Okay.
And so Dr. Muhammad Volkan, along with Mawlana Samir and Mawlana Uwais, are teaching in 3 different time zones.
Yep.
And then myself, Mawlana Faraz, and Mawlana Atiq are
Okay.
teaching in the 3 different time zones for the Quranic.
But the curriculum is going to be the same for the
Yes.
Okay, no
Yes.
matter what.
Yeah.
Because like for me, I actually was interested in the theology course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I read like so. I like my reading of Aqidah when I first started like reading, became like a practicing Muslim in my like early 20s was like, Kitab al-Tawheed, those kind of books. You know what I'm saying? Like I never read like what we call it, the Ash'ari, like the Kalam tradition. I did read Tahawiyah with Sheikh Hamza back in like 2016, 17-ish. Remember he was doing like the weekends, Tahawiyah read, like the full weekends. So I'm interested in the theology course because I don't think I've ever formally done, that kind of study. But like for folks who think like, oh, I know what I believe, like why would I have to take a theology course? Or I read like an Ulumul Quran text. There's like textbooks out there on sciences of Quran that you can buy from Islamic bookstores. Or I took a weekend seminar on Quranic sciences, like I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever. I kind of get it, At the same time, you're probably appealing to people who have never. There's no prerequisites for these, right?
Yes.
Correct. So when people are kind of like they've dabbled a little bit and they're like, oh, I already kind of know this. What would you tell those folks as far as like, to motivate them or like kind of tell them like maybe you don't, maybe you need to like study something a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean I think the fact that Darul Qasim has a position in society at the intellectual level itself, we've had many requests for this type of program to be launched.
Sure.
Because people can't come and study.
Right.
And so the desire for people to study is there.
Yep.
And because especially in the West, adult learning is a huge element of society. People don't just stop learning after they finish high school or college or even their graduate degrees. They continue to learn. And so the culture of learning is something that you do in other facets of society.
Yeah.
And so if your knowledge of Islam is not continuously growing, it's stagnant, and in reality it's regressing. And so though you may think that you know or think that you have retained what you have studied in previous years, it only comes to fruition when you interact with the ulama, when you come to a structured environment. And this is not just for Muslims of today. This is the practice and the staple of our practice from the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to when he made the hijrah, and he did this, he created this bond between the muhajirun and the ansar called mu'akha. Right? There was a Umar radiallahu anh was paired up with an Ansari companion, and that Ansari companion lived a little bit further from the masjid of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so he couldn't come every day to the majlis and to learn. And so they created a structure that Umar radiallahu anh would tend to the farm one day, and he would go and learn, and then he would go the next day. And so the structured medium is something that's necessary for the gradual growth of a Muslim's mind. And these courses are not just the basics. They're not your Sunday school level of knowledge. They are going to challenge you intellectually. They are going to push you. And there's going to be new knowledge that is created in your mind, and the ability to then represent that knowledge and represent it to your family, to your coworkers, to not even just representing it internally, so that you remove the shak and doubt that comes with living in this society. Because we live in a society that's always that is at the core a Euro-American centric society, and that education is based upon questioning. And if you can't question and answer those questions internally, you're going to be in a perpetual state of like Islam is just culture. Islam is just like learning a language. It doesn't add anything to my life if I were to replace it with something else. And so to bring Muslims into to bring Muslims to a higher level of understanding, and then representation of that ilm and representation internally and externally will do wonders. And hopefully Darul Qasim Mars program is going to be an influence in that. And so it's essentially these classes are geared for every Sunni Muslim. So I talked about the first semester. In the second semester, it's fiqh and hadith. So fiqh through all of the four madhahib, through practicing scholars of those schools of thought, and then
so there'll be an individual madhab-based fiqh course.
Yes.
Okay.
Individual madhab-based fiqh course that spans not just the ibadat, not just salat, zakat, som, hajj, but also the muamalat. So including sessions on transactions, on nikah, talaq, on jihad, on other applicable sectors of a Muslim's life. And then in the spring semester is also a study of hadith. So reading the words of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, it hits differently. It's wahy ghayr matlu. It's still revelation, but it's unrecited revelation. It's not recited the way Qu'ran is recited, but to take the civilizational values from hadith and to be imbued with them and to carry them. All of this is to kind of build a more refined Muslim, a more mu'addab Muslim.
Sure. Would you say, is it fair to say that, let's say, the theology course, you teach, there's a theology course in Sheikh al-Hind, right?
Yeah.
Is it too reductive to say that Mars is like the theology course in Mars is just the Sheikh al-Hind class with Arabic removed?
No, I would say that, you can say that's pretty accurate.
Okay.
Because of the fact that, Sheikh al-Hind does teach theology as well, and at a similar level. However, the Arabic element is huge, and so when you say reductionist, the Arabic is huge.
Yeah, in the Sheikh al-Hind part.
Yeah, because the Sheikh al-Hind students are geared towards dissecting the Arabic itself.
Yeah,
and actually, most students, their efforts in Sheikh al-Hind level in first year intermediate isn't necessarily geared towards understanding the content. I shouldn't say that in totality, but it's not necessarily geared towards understanding the content, but it's geared towards can you teach the class? Can you come and understand the text and represent it? And then from there, after that threshold is crossed, then you get to, okay, where do I situate this in my span of knowledge?
Now with this, now the plan is each semester is what, 3 months or so?
About 15 weeks. Yeah.
15 weeks. Okay, so but it's what, an hour a week for 15 weeks?
It's 90 minutes a week.
Okay.
Usually an hour of content with about 20-30 minutes of Q&A and discussion.
And then the plan is to build upon the curriculum. So let's say Dr. Volkan, I mentioned I'm planning on registering for the Dr. Volkan's course on theology. There will be like another, and I'm trying to take Dr. Volkan's class because he scares me. Like he'll be looking at me, he's like staring, like his eyes will pierce right through me, and like, Bruno. But he's also like, I've chilled with him too, so he's like, and we have similar interests. So, but I want to get some of that Turkish flavor. But is there going to be like advanced theology in Mars like next year? Is that kind of a plan for that, or are we just going to keep repeating like the basic courses for a little while?
There'll be courses on the queue that are going to be new each year, each semester, so that a person can continue structured learning. And it may not be advanced theology.
Sure.
It may be something more topical based, depending on what the times are.
Sure.
And so, but there will be new courses on the queue each year, inshallah.
Okay. Now, before I wrap up, actually, just on the March program, on the online, I was going to ask you, what does it take for someone to be successful online, right? I'll say this about most online venues. With Studio Arabiya, like, because it's one-on-one and it's video, like, I can't be off distracted on my phone. Like, it's impossible, right? A lot of times, though, when people are, like, at work, when there's a Zoom meeting, set up a Zoom meeting, there's like 30 people on the call. No one's got their cameras on. I'm pretty positive that most people are doing something else. They're multitasking, they're doing something else. I think that's a big problem with online, because, that's why I always try to attend tafsir in person. Because sometimes if I'm online at home, it's like a 30-minute drive, but still, it's like, so I'm like, okay, I can save my commute, but I don't think I'm getting as much out of it. What does it take for a student with like some of these pitfalls I just kind of like laid out, what does it take for someone to be successful in an online course?
Yeah, it is the medium does affect the message.
Sure.
So you do have to be more vigilant. You can't be a passive learner online. You do have to be an active learner, and that comes with asking questions. That comes with engagement, and so part of being having a successful online experience is trying to recreate some of that in-person atmosphere. So don't just take the class on your phone while you're driving. Make sure there's different time zones that you can set up with. Choose one in which you can sit quietly. If you have a office in your house, go there. If you don't, go to your local library, rent out a reading room for an hour and a half.
Right.
Go there and create the atmosphere of learning.
Sure.
So that is something that they state. Imam Malik used to say, "Al-ilmu la ya'ti, innama al-yu'ta ilayh."
Sure.
Knowledge doesn't come to you; you have to go to it. And so, if you're just getting up from your bed and just logging in, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. And so, go to a place where you are distracted, where you are not going to be distracted, and put those distractions aside and set it up physically. And then take care of make sure that you have the logistics of your online classes are going to happen, whether it be the coming with the paper and pencil, coming to type, even the clothes that you wear have an effect.
Okay.
They say that when you wake up for Fajr, even if you're praying at home, change into your praying clothes before you pray. because it has an effect. All these small decisions have an effect as you attempt to learn online. And then we're going to be using a Canvas as the medium through which these classes are going to be held. And there are so many tools on Canvas that in which a person can do continuous learning, even offline, whether it be through discussion boards, whether it be Q&A, reaching out to the instructor and asking questions. There's going to be recordings of the class that are put up for a week each time. And so those all help a person get into the mode of learning. And so I think that's one thing I would concentrate on, trying to recreate part of the in-person experience, but doing so remotely.
Yeah, I think one thing about the Dr. Volkan class that I think it's on an evening. So obviously we work full during the day, and I have a pretty miserable commute. I drive 40 miles to my job every day. So one thing I always thought I've always tried to factor in when I do it on an evening course is energy management, right? Can you speak a little bit? My approach is always I try to at least get a power nap in before the class. But if not, I just have to have some caffeine.
Yeah.
Any advice for those folks? I mean, there's probably a common predicament with a lot of Darul Qasim part-time students, right? They're working during the day and
they come at night.
Yeah.
So in the evening students, because I think if you have a schedule, you can choose where you can get a power nap in before class,
right?
Because there are morning and afternoon slots offered as well,
right?
And so if a person knows, hey, I can go to work a little bit late, and I know I'm going to be on my game at work. Let me get the class out of the way so I can take the morning slot, or I can take the afternoon slot because it fits within my lunch hour. And I know I'm not going to be as tired. So scheduling is important. Scheduling your day, and that comes with everything in life, right? If you're gonna exercise, if you're gonna play sports, if you're going to get reading done, you have to schedule it, and so scheduling is important. And I mean, in terms of what they should eat or drink, I won't comment on that because each person might need to, talk to a health coach, talk to a dietitian, and see what works best for them at what time. But I think it's definitely something you should plan for.
It's safe to say that eating a burger and fries right before is probably not the best idea. I think so. I think there's so the class, the Ibn Ashar class I'm taking with Sheikh Hamza is actually at 5:30 a.m.
That's good.
Because it's literally right after Fajr.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's if you are fresh. I mean, I think sometimes you're well, you're not. Yeah, you should sleep at a certain time the night before.
Yeah.
If you're sleeping at 1 a.m., it's not going to be you'll be zoned out. But as we wrap up here, I know there's some other offerings that Darul Qasim has. We talked about the Sheikh al-Hind, the intermediate program. These are kind of for the people on a program. But there's all these. It seems like at Mars is for the ad hoc adult learner. That's right. Are there other programs? I know there's some ethics courses that are offered from time to time that students who are professionals who will take an ad hoc course here or there. What else is available right now if someone else is as far as program goes?
For part-time programs, there is we do have a bioethics course in which there are different. I think there are 2 classes for the bioethics programs that are geared for medical students and doctors. Alhamdulillah, has been very successful over the past few years, and the need for it has grown. And then we do have part-time classes, evening classes. For students who want to learn. And so one might think that it's only at the Sheikh al-Hind level. We do offer even intermediate level classes part-time. And in the evenings and sometimes even on the weekends. And so those classes are there.
But you have to place into that. That's not something there are prerequisites, of course.
There are prerequisites for those classes.
Right.
And even at the many students who are graduates of institutions come and study at Darul Qasim, and that's where there is a takhasus fit tafsir program, a specialization in tafsir. They have we have an ifta program for aspiring muftis, and so there is, mashallah, a wide range of programs from a person who's just getting started, even to people who have been studying for decades.
Sure. So, like, let's say somebody is interested in like pursuing, whether they're, let's say they're in Chicago area. Let's just keep it simple. They're in Chicago. They're a working professional. They've dabbled. They've studied somewhat. Do you guys have like where's the best way for them to find, like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's customized necessarily, unless you're saying it is, but like where they can do some kind of assessment to see what kind of program is right for them.
Yeah, so usually people reach out to the registrar's office or to the academic advising office,
Sure.
and they schedule a meeting.
Okay.
And if they want to place in higher in a specific year, or they want to study a specific text, then we get to do you have the qualifications to study that text?
Sure.
And then you take an assessment
Right.
to see whether or not you qualify. But if you're just coming just to study the classes that don't have any prerequisites, those are there as well.
Okay. Sure, for sure. Mawlana Kamil, it's been a pleasure. Anything you want to like wrap up with, or anything that we missed as far as the program goes?
No, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan for having me. The Mars program does have a registration deadline towards the end of this month in
July. Yeah, so I'm going to try to get this out in the next couple of days, so people have adequate time.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yeah,
alhamdulillah.
Sheikh Amin had asked me for, he's like, hey, we should, what ideas do you have to promote this program? Like, this is maybe like a month ago or so, and I was like, oh, I do podcasts and something like that. So I'm not like, I was like, well, that'd be great. I'm like, all right, well, the Sheikh asked you to do something. You got to come through, right?
Alhamdulillah, man.
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khair, pull through.
Yeah, no, I saw him a few weeks ago at a wedding, and he was like, somebody asked him about the Mars program, and he looks at me, he's like, he's going to do a podcast about it. Wait for the podcast. So, yeah, definitely got to come through. Hope all the videos and audio checks out. But, alhamdulillah, everything, appreciate all your service. And, I gotta have you back on to talk about like the cars and stuff and other hobbies.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. All right. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, and the website is darulqasim.org.
Yes.
And just go there and you can find everything you need. Program, everything there. Okay. So for our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at info@sultansandsneakers.com. If you want to support the channel financially, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Sultans and Sneakers. If you can't do so, at least share the podcast with your friends and family. If you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe. If you're listening on audio podcast apps like Apple Podcasts or Google or Spotify, just hit me with a 5-star review. For my special guest, Mawlana Kamil Uddin, I'm your host, Mahinda Podcaster, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.